Now, NDE Radio, a weekly exploration of near-death experiences and similar encounters with the other side. Now, here's your host, Lee Witting.
Welcome to NDE Radio with Lee Witting, whether you're listening on TalkZone, by podcast, through the archives of our ad-free shows on our YouTube channel, or connected through the incredible content of our Facebook page. During my term as editor of the IANDS quarterly magazine Vital Signs several years ago, I published an article titled The 3-Year-Old Father. It was the report of a fascinating near-death experienced by Leonard Rogers when he was run down by a car at the age of 3. Later on, I got to interview Leonard firsthand, and that's the conversation you're about to hear about today. What makes this NDE particularly unique is that the 3-year-old Leonard had a life review not of his past life, but of the life that lay before him, a future life review. When he recovered, it was a blessing that he forgot his future life. That is, until years later when his brother unexpectedly died. As a heartbroken Leonard turned to the internet to research what it means to die, the memory of his own NDE returned, and with it, a surprising clue about a child he'd fathered, but never known. Leonard Rogers, welcome to NDE Radio.
Thanks, Lee. Thank you for having me.
And please begin, if you will, when you were hit by that car at age 3.
Well, it happened, like I said, at a very young age. I was 3, and I was following an uncle who happened to have been going across the street to a store. And I followed him out the door, and he didn't know it, of course. And a short time later, I step into the street, and, of course, I'm struck by the car. And at that time, after I got hit, only thing I can remember doing is trying to move, trying to make my body work. And I didn't have any control over my body at all, but I could see. So at that particular time, I tried to struggle a little bit more, to move things. And at the point that I decided to stop fighting, all of a sudden I felt vibration go through my body. And it's like the vibration started slowly, and then it worked its way up to a climax. Well, when it finally got to the climax, I felt myself lift out of my body. And it's at this point that I'm seeing things from a third-person perspective. I'm looking at the scene, and I can see buildings. And I remember noticing that the buildings look like the negatives of a photo. And I also noticed that there was a woman calling me, to come to her across the street, because it was like it was an intersection, and she was on another side of the street. So the communication wasn't verbal. It was like she thought it, and I instantly got it. Well, she asked me to come to her, of course, and I was a little nervous, so I replied that I thought I was going to get hit again. And she informed me that I would be okay. So I decided, okay, well, I'll go. I really didn't even know how I was going to do it, but I just started, I guess. And the next thing I know, I'm moving. And as I'm moving, I noticed a really bright white light, like over my right shoulder. And as I look at this light, I felt as if I had seen all of this before, or, I had been where I was before. And as I'm having that feeling, I happen to notice a picture of me, just appear. And as I'm looking at this picture, I'm thinking, oh, I remember that moment. I don't know how I know I remember that moment, because at the time, apparently, I hadn't lived a life. But as I'm looking at the picture, I remember the moment. So this picture goes by, and another picture comes up, and these are obviously images of my life. So these pictures start going by, pictures, videos, images. You would think, I guess, everything that I'm going through now, I was shown a bit of it then. So these things start going by, and at some point in time, it goes by a little too quickly. And it's like I couldn't take the speed in which they were going by, but I was living every moment of it. It's kind of hard to explain. But at some point in time, it stopped on a particular picture. Now, as I'm looking at this picture, amazed and like shocked because I realized I'm looking at a picture of my son. I was like, wow, that's my son. You know, I was just at awe that I was looking at a picture of my son. So,
and you're at this time just 3 years old, right?
3 years old, yes. And I'm looking at a picture of my son, and I knew it was my son. I don't know how, but as I'm looking at this picture, I knew that this was my son. Mm-hmm. So what I guess this would be a life review. Well, it continued, and at some point it ended. Now, when it ended, I was moving again, and it's like I stepped into this dark tunnel, or it was like a subway tunnel almost, but it was dark. And if I looked to my left, as I looked to my left, I noticed that there were other people stepping into this same tunnel. And I had figured or assumed that they had just saw what I saw. And so it's at this point that I see some other things. I'm going to try to make it as short as possible for you because it could be a long show. But
no, that's all right. Give us as much detail as you can.
Okay, well, I also noticed a figure to my right. Now, I'm going to give you the feelings I had when I looked to the right, that this figure had just saw and knew everything that I had just seen. And I don't know if it was shame or guilt, but I knew at particular points during the life review that I now call it or know, that there were times I wanted to look away. And I couldn't. It's like I was being forced to look at those times. So with that in mind, as I'm looking at this figure, I looked away quickly because I guess it was out of shame of what we had both witnessed. So I noticed the door in front of me as when I looked ahead. Now, I believe there was some writing above the door. At the time, I might have known perfectly well what the was, but as it is right now, I couldn't say. But I know I did not go through that door. And to my left, it was darkness. I mean, it was complete darkness. And that kind of scared me. So at the moment, I'm feeling this fear. I feel like a 2 or 3 mile an hour breeze come from the direction of the person I was trying not to look at. And when that breeze hit me, all the fear that I had completely went away. It's as if the word fear meant no sense to me. And it's at this point, I'm now holding hands, like I'm turned around, and I'm now holding hands with the woman that called me to come to her. And we're looking at the scene. As I turn around looking with her holding hands, I noticed that we're looking at the scene of the accident. So what I see you said hold nothing back, so I'll tell you exactly what I saw. It looked to be like it was on some type of big screen. Mm-hmm. And as I'm looking at this huge screen, I see the car, I see my family members, and I can see other people around and the person that hit. Now, for some reason, I wasn't concerned about me. It's almost like I didn't want to look at it. And when as we're looking at this, I'm holding hands with her, and I asked her at this particular time, I said, why are they worried about that thing on the ground? I'm okay. And I honestly felt like that scene to me was like being in a car accident and having the car totaled. But I'm able to get out of it, stand with my family members, and have my family members crying over the car.
In other words, your body was like a car.
It felt like I had no connection to it at all. Mm-hmm. Like I had no concern about it at all, and I didn't see why anybody else would. So that scene, to me, at some point, I guess it got to be too much, and I didn't want to see it anymore. So it's like I was taken, I don't know if it was voluntary or I was just taken, without my control, but I was taken somewhere, and it was really, really dark in this place. Now, I could sense that there were other people around me, but I couldn't see them or didn't want to see them. I don't know. But one of the distinct things I can remember while I was in that dark place was I kept hearing like a whisper in my ear, go to the light, go to the light. And as I look back, I know hearing that almost irritated me for some reason. I don't know why, but I guess I didn't want to leave at that particular time, but I'm there what it seemed like an eternity. I would have to say, Lee, I was there, it seemed like 42 years, it seemed like to me, even though I don't know how long the accident, was in total. To me, it seemed like a lifetime I was there just thinking. But at some point in time, I guess my mindset changed, or I thought about something, and it was good thought because I felt myself rise up to, it was still a dark place, but now I can see at least the outlines or auras of people. And I could sense conversations. I could communicate, it would seem. And at this point, things are kind of fuzzy. I can't remember exactly everybody or if I interacted with anybody other than one particular person. But there was one particular person I distinctly remember talking to. Now, there's a young girl named Anna. I cannot remember her name, Lee, but she's a 9-year-old prodigy. Mm-hmm. She's been painting since she was 4. Mm-hmm. She painted the exact, it's like she painted a portrait or a photo of the person that I spoke with. Now, this person, he told me, I can't remember all of the conversation, but I do remember being told that I would not remember everything that I saw or most of this conversation. And I remember being kind of irritated about that. But he told me that, and then he asked me a couple of questions. He asked me, well, why do you want to go back? And I told him at first that I wanted to go back to help my mother raise my brothers. Now, at the time, it's only me and one brother. But I told him that I wanted to go back and help my mama raise my brothers, which meant that I knew my mother was going to have more children. So he kind of chuckled at that, and he asked me what was the real reason I wanted to go back. And I told him I want to leave the world a better place than I had. With that being said, Lee, all of a sudden, I'm being shot back toward the accident scene. I now know it was the accident scene. At the time, I didn't know where I was going. I just know I was moving at a high rate of speed. Mm-hmm. And the next day, I know I'm back at the accident scene. And as I'm looking at it now, it's like it's been 100 years since I've been to this scene. It's like, why am I back here? And I can't explain it, but the time and the speed at which we move is incredible. But that's how I felt looking back at this scene. Now, at some particular point, somebody approaches the scene, walks up to the scene, and this person is immensely tall. And would have been scary had I not felt comfortable seeing that person. I felt like this person was a comforter or something of mine, or a protector. And I believe this person was the person that sent me back to this side. So as I'm sitting there, the next thing I know, I'm going through like a tunnel that swirls, and I hear music and chimes, and I'm coming back. I now know I'm coming back to this apparent reality. But before I come back, I'm like hovering inside the bumper, looking at my body like straight on, like it would be if you're looking at a mirror. And I'm at this point dreading going back into it. It's like the last thing I really wanted to do was go back into it, and it was like I was crying inside. And the next thing I know, I'm thrown back into my body, and as if nothing had ever happened. Now, at this point, you can imagine people are frantic, and I'm picked up by, I now know the person that hit me had picked me up because they were apparently worried about ambulance not making it there in time, and then the person apparently gave me to my mother. Now, all through this time, I know I'm not crying. I mean, as a matter of fact, when me and my mother talked about it over the years, the only thing I could remember when we talked about the accident was that I knew I wasn't crying. But I didn't know why. I couldn't remember why. It was like that was a blank spot. I was like, I know I wasn't crying, but I don't remember why. And I now know that it was because I had a little bit of that peace come back with me. And it was only when my mother was checking me out and she was frantic that kind of scared me and had me thinking, well, was that I just went through? And it's at that particular time I cried for the first time. So that was the NDE, as it were, and its full entirety. Now, the after effects are astounding in itself, because I didn't remember any of this until after my brother passed away. So, with that being said,
and that was years later, right?
Yes, that was years later. But
how old were you? How old were you when that happened?
It just happened in 2010.
Yes.
And I'll explain how that happened. But one of the things that stuck out to me was when I was brought back from the hospital. As a matter of fact, I just found out that when I was in the hospital, the doctors, checked me out, and there were a few. They said I was pretty much okay, and were ready to send me home. But my grandmother was a real religious woman, and she told the doctors, "No, you're not going to let my grandson go home." And she convinced the doctors to keep me overnight. Well, that night my kidneys ruptured, and my mother checked me out, and she noticed that my catheter had blood all in it, and she, of course, lost it, and the doctors, they tried to save my kidneys and save my life. So apparently they did a good job. So with that being said, life continued. So I was released from the hospital, and what I remember now, and it stands out to me as a big moment, was after seeing that life review, I saw an awful lot, Lee. And when my mother brought me home for the first time, and she set me down to play with my brother. When I looked at him, Lee, it was as if how a dog can like turn his head and when it's wondering about a particular moment or something looks funny to it. Well, when I looked at my brother, that's the kind of feeling I had. It was like, how am I looking at you? Because apparently, Lee, I had seen even his death and facets of my life, and including his death. And so when I looked at him, it was like, how am I looking at you? And after all I've seen, but I was so young, it didn't take long for it. I'm not thinking about that anymore. And life continued. And as the years went by, this memory got pushed further and further and further from my mind until it was all but got up till my brother passed away in 2010. And I don't think that was an accident. I think that was almost like a time lock, because his death hit me so hard that it would have took something like that for me to be comforted. Because the way I remembered what happened to me was that he died in his sleep, and I didn't get a chance to say bye to him, and I felt kind of cheated. I was raised in the Church of God in Christ, and I know what type of lifestyle my brother lived, and I was worried about him suffering in the hell and, being tormented, and I was just wondering what he went through. So I don't know what led me to do it, but I just want to know what he went through. I Googled what happens when you die. And these things pop up called near-death experiences. So I'm looking at these videos, and to be honest, I'm pretty much writing the people off, and that's pretty much the gist of what I thought of it. But I wanted to know so badly that I just kept watching them. I missed them so badly. So as I'm watching this one video, and I guess this guy had got with like a movie producer to give us a glimpse of what he saw, to give us a visual representation. So as I'm watching this one video, I was sitting in front of a computer, and just matter-of-factly, he gets to this point, and I say, oh, I remember that. Just like that, Lee. I remember that. Lee, I backed away from the computer like it had just spoke to me. And I wondered, where did that memory come from? So I went outside to think about it. And when I stepped outside and thought about that memory, it's as if the floodgates to everything that I had saw came back to me. And so it's at that point, for the first time in over 40 years, I realized what happened to me. And, I mean, I can't describe to you to know what it's like when you pass, what happens when you die. I mean, that's the ultimate question, Lee. And to know that you caught a glimpse of it, I mean, it was quite a day, I'll tell you that. It was quite a day. So, and now, my first reaction is, okay, well, I want to comfort everybody. I know, hey, if that was death, we don't have anything to worry about. I mean, that peace was amazing. I mean, if that was death, let me shout it to the world. So the first thing I want to do is tell my mother. Of course, she's torn up because it hadn't been but a few months from, I think he died in August, in August 2010. By September, I remember. So now I want to comfort her, but it's still so fresh. So when I go, imagine this, Lee, I go to my mother, I say, Mama, don't worry. I know what happened to Avery. I know what happened when you died. Okay, think about that moment. And, of course, you can imagine my mother's like, okay, he's lost it. He's lost it. But my mother, being the person she is, she worked with me. She said, well, maybe now it's not a good time to talk about it. So, and so I had to come to grips that I have to just a way to approach everybody, and I can't just do it like that. But to me, this was earth shattering, And so over the time, I kept trying to convince my mother and other family members that I had caught a glimpse and not to worry about it. But it's a subject that I found that people stray away from. They're scared of it. And as I'm coming to grips with all of this, I'm having headaches that are extremely, painful. I wouldn't wish these headaches on anybody I know, but I had been dealing with it. I would take me a few pain pills and ride through it, but it had got to the point where they were extreme. They would bring tears to my eyes every time, and I would almost take anything. I would have welcomed death, to be honest with you, to get away from those headaches. And I'm having one day, and my mother, she's still going through the things with my brother passing, and I didn't want to put her through anything else. She asked me to go to the hospital. Well, normally I would have said, no, I'll be fine, but I didn't want to put her through anything, so I decided, okay, I'll go. So we go to the hospital, and they give me some, they take some x-rays, and while they take the x-ray, while we're waiting on the results, I'm getting a little rest, and one of the nurses runs in basically and said, Mr. Rogers, we're going to need you to put on this robe. The doctor found some blood. He's going to be in here to explain to you. They're going to be taking you up and prepping you for surgery. So I'm like, at this point, like, okay, what part did I miss? I just walked in here with a headache. Why am I having some surgery? So the doctor walks in and he explains to me that, yes, they indeed had found an aneurysm and that they were going to take me up and give me emergency surgery to try to stop the bleeding. So he pretty much, like Dr. House, said good luck and walked out of the room. So
very cold doctor, huh?
I guess that was the best he could do, but I just took it, and at this point now I'm having a deja vu because when he walked out, I started having a deja vu, and I'm sitting there with my mother, and I asked her after he walked out. I said, "Mother, Mom, what do you think about what I told you happened to me? Because it's been a while now." And I asked her again what she thought about it. That's when she was brutally honest, and she told me that she thought I had made up this fantasy world because I missed my brother. And that was kind of hard, but because you want your mother to believe you above anybody. If I can understand if it's come from somebody else, but you want your mama to believe you. So they did some tests, and they were pretty much finalizing the surgery. It's at this point that, since I know my mother still didn't believe me, I put a prayer out there, and I asked that my mother be shown that all of this was real and that everything go away. So I said that prayer, and after that prayer, every test that they did, I mean, they couldn't find anything, and they couldn't explain it. They gave me a spinal tap to look for the blood, and they just couldn't find the blood, and they couldn't explain it. So after a while, I'm approached, and they wanted me to sign some papers, understandably, because they had given me some steroids and things of that nature, and they were worried about a lawsuit probably. But I had knew that I was going to be okay, and I had actually told my mother that I would be okay and I would walk out of the hospital. I don't know how I knew, but I just knew it. So life goes on. I leave the hospital, and, you know, I have to say, Lee, I felt a sense of invincibility after the aneurysm, because it was as if I knew I had something to do, and until I do it, I wouldn't be going anywhere. I had an old girlfriend, and we were high school lovers, and we stayed in Houston, and I had to move back here with my mom. Well, I got one phone call from her since I moved back, and I hadn't heard from her since. And that one phone call, she told me that she thought she might have been pregnant. Now, after the accident, my mother had told me that the doctors told her that it would probably be difficult for me to have children. So couple that with the fact that she told me that she thought she might have been pregnant and I never heard from her again, I was thinking, okay, well, maybe she wasn't pregnant, or maybe it wasn't mine, or she just was never pregnant. But over the years, from time to time, I would think about her. And, you know, I within a couple of days, I would try to look up on the internet and see if I could at least hear from her, see how things are going, how life had treated her. And that happened over and over, you know, over the course of years. So I'm doing this one day after not long after the aneurysm, you know, I had this happen to me again, so I'm trying to look for her. And, of course, I don't find her, but I just happened to notice a young man with her last name at the bottom of the page. So I said, well, maybe he's some kin to her. So I took a chance and I contacted the young man. And I said, I think I might know your mother. And I gave him a little background on her. And to my surprise, he confirmed that, yes, this was indeed his mother. At which time, he then told me that she had also been dead since he was 10. Now, I was taken aback, you know, from hearing that because, you know, after all these years, I was like wondering, why would I be thinking about her all these years? So I asked him if he could send me some pictures of her at least. So he sent me some pictures of her and the family. And as I'm looking at one of the pictures that he sent me with him on it, I noticed that it looked rather familiar. So as I'm reshaping it and resizing it to get a good look at his features, I realized that he had just sent me the same exact picture that I talked about in the previous show that was paused on when I was 3 years old.
Right, when you were having that preview of your life, you saw his face.
Yes, I was going through the preview, and at one point in time, it stopped on one particular picture. And I realized when I was looking at that picture, now I'm 3, I realized when I was looking at that picture that I was looking at a picture of my son. Now, the feeling that I had when I looked at that picture, I now realize was the exact emotion that I felt the day that I saw that picture on the internet. So it's like I was feeling the emotions of the day that I saw. I mean, or the day that he actually sent me the picture.
Yes.
So it's at this point now, Lee, I realize that this is my son, and that was, you know, just you can't prepare yourself to find a son you never knew you had. I mean, how do you prepare for that, Lee? So, yes, I've met him since this is all unfolded. I've met him, and you know, we get along as if we've known each other all of these years, and we talk about it, and he's a nice young man. Of course, you know, he has his issues as any other young man of his age, but for the most part, I'm proud of the way he was able to come up. and without either one of his parents being there. So, with that being said, we're just growing and trying to get to know each other better. But all of this is really shown to be an incredible life so far, and I just wonder what's to come, Lee.
Well, I'm wondering, have you told your son this story?
Yes, I have. And
what did he think?
Well, I was skeptical at first, but I didn't want to hold anything back. I wasn't going to, sugarcoat anything or say anything other than what was the truth. And that's exactly what I presented to him. And he accepted it as the truth and told me some things about himself that, made me realize why he would believe something like that. So it went by kind of easily, kind of good.
That's good. Does he have an understanding of NDEs from what you've told him?
Well, he's trying to understand them now. I don't know if he realized or understood, that much about them at the time. But we've dialogued and, get to know each other, and him learning about NDEs is him getting to know his father, really. So, yes, he's learning about it as we speak.
One of the neat things that you told about when you were describing your near-death experience when you were 3 years old and hit by that car was the woman that called to you. Did you recognize her? Do you see any indication of who she might be, or could she even be the woman who later died, the mother of the child when he was 10?
I don't know, Lee, but I will tell you this. I was as comfortable going to her or communicating with her as I would have been with my own mother. So it's like it wasn't even a thought of who she was at the time, because I just felt comfortable with her. No, I wonder about that to this day, to be honest with you.
Whether that was a deceased relative or friend or perhaps another kind of spirit.
Yeah, I've asked if we had any deceased relatives that could have possibly been, and I can't confirm anybody that it could have been. So that's one of the questions that I have with me. I take daily. So I can't answer that one for you. I don't know who that one was, but I know I was comfortable with her. I know I was comfortable with her.
Wow. Your experience raises so many questions about the nature of time, because there you were 3 years old. You had a preview of major events in your life that hadn't even happened yet. The title of the article in our Vital Signs magazine was The 3-Year-Old Father, because there you were 3 years old and yet recognizing a picture or a vision of your own son to be. Have you given some thought as to how time works when you think about your experience?
Every day, Lee, every day of my life. And that's why, this is an ongoing process for me, to learn. I use other people's NDEs and their experiences to learn. Just like I would, when I was into church, I would, resort to the Bible to learn. Well, to me, Lee, these are my new confirmation or Bibles, if you would. These are how I gain understanding is from the experiences of other people. I have to give them credibility because it happened to me. So, if I can learn something in life from what somebody else has went through, then of course I'm going to implement it in my life. And that's what I do now. That's why I go to meetings to interact with other people who have had NDEs, to see if there are similarities between my experience and theirs.
I want to thank Leonard Rogers for sharing his unique story of the 3-year-old father and the insights his story provides about the flexibility of time. And of course, my thanks to you for listening. If you'd like to hear this show again or any of our more than 500 archived ad-free NDE interviews, go to TalkZone's NDE Radio site and hit the Past Shows button, or go to our YouTube channel, NDE Radio with Lee Witting, where you can subscribe to and comment on the complete NDE Radio library. And be sure to check out our NDE Radio Facebook page. Just search NDE Radio with Lee Witting on your Facebook app. And listen next Monday 11 a.m. Eastern at TalkZone for more NDE Radio. I'm your host, Lee Witting, saying, once again, thanks for listening.